Mary Me, Annie here. This video is about my personal altars over time. I've had questions from people about, have they changed? Do I do things differently? Do I have pictures of altars that I've had in the past? There was a time that I actually had quite a collection of pictures of my altars, and it was on a computer that crashed. We've all gone that route, haven't we? There were times in my life. Well, first off, I should go back to the beginning when altars were just a couple of stones or a candle. On a bureau top especially. Bureaus came in really handy for those early altars when I didn't have privacy and needed to make use of small amounts of space. I've had altars in closets. I have had them in a bathroom. Yes, I had an altar in a bathroom once. The only quiet space I had, the only private space I had at that particular point in my life. They've been more and more sophisticated, I would say, over the years. Probably have been consistently the same, probably now since the 80s, where certain representations just needed to be on the altar for me. Some of that came out of my early practice, where I learned the significance of the things we would place on a Wiccan altar. My own little things got added. I found the place that I wanted things to reside. Even in that instance, when certain things I just needed emotionally to have on an altar and needed for spiritual purposes, the altar could be simple or complex. For years I had an altar that was just stones. Then I had an altar that was nothing more than an elemental altar. That was, if I remember correctly now, a feather, a candle, water, and earth. Not salt, but actually earth. And my paten, which has always been present on all of my altars, was at the center of that one. It was kind of just a basic elemental altar. And the reason is, over years I had different needs. I needed my altar to be always my sacred center, but I needed it to match where I was. For a long time I did seasonal altars that were actually, my main altar would change with a lot of things that would change with every turning of the season, from the altar cloth to what I put on it. I gave that up probably, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And that's when I started doing an altar for the dark half of the year and an altar for the light half of the year. Now that doesn't mean that elsewhere I might not have altars represent the season. And all of my altars do have small representations of the current season on them. And I'll show you on my current altar what represents the cycle we are currently in. But I've not had a need for a long time to have a constantly changing altar. My need has been to have it to be consistent. That when I am in front of it, I just settle into a certain, I don't want to say predictable, expected frame of mind. And I need predictability. I need it to be the same. It's something that I've needed. Tomorrow, that could suddenly change. I'm open to it changing. If my needs are to be met in a different way, I will meet them in a different way. But there may be small seasonal altars in the house that I put up for certain reasons. There are certainly altars I put up to do certain workings on. I tend to have my main altar, which is behind me, and then that small table that you've seen in a lot of my videos, which is the working of the moment, will be placed on that. Again, it's because if I want to settle in front of that and focus on that, especially if it's an action over time, I want that dedicated to just that. And my main altar I will sit in front of for my morning meditations, my evening meditations, expecting it to be a certain way. In my case, needing it to be a certain way. So my altars have changed over time, from the very simplest laying on of some symbols of the elements, or just the lighting of a candle, to something more formalized, because I happen to really enjoy the construction and appreciation and the centering, gathering in aspects of a formalized altar. Question I often get. Actually, it's not even so much a question. I get comments all the time that, well, that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. Those comments are absolutely correct. Not necessarily put in the most polite way, but true, 100% true. Not necessary for my practice, desired for my practice. I like the beauty of an altar. I like the intentional placement of revered objects. It's my oasis. It's my haven. It's my quiet place. I'm always going to have an altar of some kind. Even if it shifts in the way I need it to be set up going forward, the only thing I know for sure is there will always be one. Regarding the specifics of why, in a traditional sense, I use an altar, I do have another video I've just put up about that. Let me show you the current altar I have. That way I can show you the things that are always on my altar and the few things that are there representing this season. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the specifics of what's on my altar because I think I've just done that not too long ago in another video. But I am going to take time to show you what is always on my altar. Now by always, I mean it's been always now probably for 15 years or so. First thing is, I only have 2 altar cloths. This is the dark half of the year's altar cloth. And then I have a light colored green linen cloth that I use for the light time of the year, the light half of the year. Personal preference. I prefer that rather than constantly re-engineering my altar. Always on my altar, of course, is my paten. And if you know from previous videos, I actually have 2, a glass one and a wooden one. So that's a necessity for me always to be in the middle of the altar. And some way of holding representations or place-to-place representations of the 4 elements is a must for me. I will always have my blade on my altar, incense bowl. Behind that bowl is always on my altar the stones that I use for divination and my bell. I will always have my cauldron on my altar and representations of my animal guide and of Parvati. And of course Sophia is always on my altar. And if we look up top, I will always have my chalice on my altar. And I will always have candles for the god and the goddess on my altar. I tend to have my witch's mirror on my altar for the dark time of the year, and I will have a regular clear mirror for the light time of the year. And I will always have a representation of Hestia and a candle lit for her on my altar. These are the things which for me never change. I do, for every season of the year, have small representations of the season. These have come to me over time, very often as gifts, and therefore their meaning increases to me, so they will show up. I actually have a trunk that I keep the various seasonal things that I place on my altar. The seasonal things which are currently on my altar, other than the witch's mirror and the dark velvet altar cloth, are I have a little pumpkin, which I especially cherish now. It was a gift from my former priestess, and since I've moved away, that gift has become that much more poignant. And to the right of the witch's mirror, as you look at it, there's a small glass walnut. And it's an offering bowl that was given to me by a friend, and it's actually a friend who has passed over, and it's a very meaningful thing for me. And the only other thing that's specifically on this altar are small silk leaves. And they were used in a ritual probably, 10 years ago. And it was a particularly meaningful one for me. And was it 10 years ago? Yeah, about 10 years ago. And it was the last ritual that my priestess from my coven before the last one, it was the last ritual she conducted before she died. And we each took away some of these silk leaves. It was in Mabon of that year. And I have always, ever since then, put them out on my altar at Mabon each year, and they stay there until the winter solstice. So there's only usually going to be a couple of things on my altar which are seasonal. Now I will have things that are work in progress. If I don't set up a separate working altar for it, if it doesn't need that kind of space or doesn't need to be kept up for a long length of time, I will have things happening on my altar, but in general it doesn't change. Now when I say don't change, the structure of the altar can change drastically. This setup is certainly very different, especially with the 2 layers, with the shelf and with things happening below it and above it. Very different than my setup before we moved to this new house. For me, it's not about this thing needs to be in this specific place in this specific order so much as I know the things I need to satisfy me to be on my altar permanently and without change. So for me it's a bit of a quirk that I don't like to change, redecorate, and renew the altar for every season or every rite or every holiday. I did it for many years and I really enjoyed creating elemental altars for different times of the year, for different aspects to celebrate different deities. I just haven't needed that for quite some time, so they've gotten a little bit more predictable. I think the older I've gotten, the more I've had a need for steadiness, a need. In other words, when I look at this altar, I don't spend time noticing anything in particular that's different. I appreciate the beauty of it, but when I am in front of it, I just automatically quiet down to a place of centering. In other words, I'm not distracted by my altar, I'm fed by my altar. I will get the urge to set up a seasonal altar someplace in the house. So it's not that I don't have that in me, but my main altar has settled down into something that has become, for me, quite predictable, and is exactly what I need because of that. I've said many times in this video what I need. Yep, it pleases me. A thing of beauty, a thing I have created, a thing manufactured with certain intent and to a certain purpose. I have seen so many amazing, amazing altars over time. From the simplest, most basic declaration of sacred space that might have one item in it, to the most convoluted and amazing, full of expensive statuary and exotic things, those that continually shift with the season, artist friends that just make the most beautiful artistic statements about their ever-changing, ever recreated altar spaces. And I love them. I absolutely love them. It's just not how it's been for me for some time now. I need the sense of coming home to the same place every time I come to my altar. I hope that answers some of your questions that you had about personal altar space and what it was like for me. I wish you mirth and reverence. Mary Part.